Yo, and welcome to the MixWizard Sessions episode 10. Now, this is a really exciting episode. I actually think we're going to probably chop it up into a couple episodes, but we'll figure that out as we go. Okay, this is our interview with Dr. Rob Clark from Allen Heath. I want to set the scene here a little bit. If you don't know who Dr. Rob is the boss at Allen Heath. But he's not just the boss. He is an absolute passionate audio engineer, enthusiast, mad scientist, amongst many things. He loves and is passionate about audio, and I hope that comes across real clear in this interview. I love when I get to talk to him. Rob has a wealth of knowledge when it comes to compressors and DSP algorithms. He's been with Allen Heath for a long time now and has been involved right through the process. So that's what we're talking to, because he is, the godfather of these deep plugins. So these compressor algorithms and all of that modeling. Okay, Rob has been there right through the process and still does modeling now. So there's not a lot of, CEOs, bosses of the company that get down and get their hands on the tools and get involved. But Rob and the guys at Allen Heath have a passion for delivering high quality audio. And I know that'll come across when we're talking with Rob. One other thing, Rob and I did try to make it work where we streamed the audio, but we couldn't get it to work well enough. So I'm going to jump out as we talk about different compressor models. It's going to jump to me, and I'm going to give you and show you some practical examples of that, and then we're going to jump back to the interview. Okay, I hope you really enjoy this, and let's jump into this interview with Dr. Rob. Hey, so everyone, here we are in the episode now, and I have the one and only Rob Clark with me. And I'm going to ask Rob a whole bunch of questions about compressors, and hopefully it's going to open a bunch of discussion for us. So first off, Rob, when did your love of compressors start, your fascination of compressors, and do you remember the first compressor you ever used?
Wow, MixWizard, that's going back some way. I think my first compressor was probably a guitar pedal in the 80s. I don't think I knew what it did. I went into a guitar shop like we all did, and someone said it created lots of sustain, so I bought it, and I think I just chucked it in line with my distortion pedals to create even more noise, and it made my distortion even bigger, so I was pretty happy with myself that day. But I didn't understand what it did. That would have been probably early 80s. So yeah. I then really used compressors with a console, probably in the early 90s at the BBC. I was working in acoustics, but in the evenings I used to nerd out in one of their production studios with a Sony or a Yamaha digital console, and I was playing around with their compressors on different instruments and trying to understand what they did with different instruments. It's kind of the start of really what we're going to talk about today is how compressors work with different instruments and different mixes. So yeah, it's probably my dabblings with compressors. What about yours, Corf?
Well, okay, so my first one, similar. I pretty much had no idea. I was mixing a show where I did a walk-in, and I'm pretty sure it was some DBX 160 XTs from memory, and some 900 frames. The XTs were strapped across the PA, left-right bus, and then some 900 inserts. But they've only got 3 knobs. They're not that hard to get too wrong. But if you've got all those lights lighting up, that's a bad thing. That's a lot of compression on those compressors.
I guess we'll end up talking about the DBX 160 in a little bit more detail later, eh?
Yeah, definitely. So another question though, when in your first or early experiences, were you wearing a lab coat when you were adjusting those compressors?
I probably was. Yeah. Well, good. Yeah, I think I probably was. I obviously don't wear one now. I'm down in my development bunker down here, and I don't wear a lab coat every day. Depends on the weather. But yeah, we do like to wear a lab coat when it's serious work.
Yeah. I want to bring the lab coat back. I think that era of like the Beatles, and you see those classic photos of the road.
Yeah, with a pencil up here and an ampersand.
They were very stylish, I think we need to bring some of that style back. So
yeah, well, okay. Well, maybe we'll get them if you get a MixWizard one. Or maybe you dress up as a MixWizard at some point.
Yeah, definitely.
And we'll wear lab coats again.
Yep. The next time we're on a trade show together,
Okay, mate.
I'll have the
That's a date.
MixWizard lab coat. Nice. So when did you start with getting involved in compressor modeling, and how did that come to pass?
I think really we started getting requests from sound engineers that digital compressors didn't really sound, they didn't really have the flavour and didn't really do what analog compressors did. And the first early digital consoles were certainly, sure, it was challenging times when those consoles came out. Not just us, obviously, everyone developing digital consoles had very basic digital compressors. And they didn't have the flavour, didn't really respond to audio in the way that analog compressors did. And I think customers began to realise that, and the feedback was strong. Why can't you give me a compressor that responds a little bit more like my 160 or my favourite compressor from wherever? So we started collecting that data, talking to engineers, trying to understand how people use compressors in a live environment, and trying to separate that from studio use, and went on that journey from there. Really, Paul.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, well, in my experience, I use compressors a lot in mixing to shape a sound. So I definitely understand that, and I did the early digital experience, and understand that people would use the words clean or too clinical. So they definitely did their job of compressing the sound, but it didn't give it a character that I was after. So I definitely understand, and that's where the beauty of modeling has come into this, to give, in the digital realm, give you those characters. So just as an idea, when you guys are creating a model, like how many man hours goes into?
They all vary. They all vary. Some are done over a period of months and years. So you might spend a couple of months on something, then get stuck on something, work on something else. So it's really difficult to kind of give you a straight timeline. But roughly speaking, some compressors could take 2 or 3 months. Some compressors, like the Peak 76 and some of the Opto devices, can take 6 to 9 months. In fact, possibly Peak 76 was over a year, but we weren't working continuously on it. And that's usually researching, maybe getting a different unit. Maybe it can take 2 or 3 months to hunt down a different revision of a compressor to see what the differences are. Or maybe even just do some background research and talk to sound engineers on how they use them, or go off and do a bit of, see what it does in the real world. So that's that kind of process, really cool.
Yeah. In the modeling side of it, what has been your favourite part of that? Like starting, the middle? Is there something?
Okay, yeah. I think it's all quite enjoyable. The journey at the start's great because you start to understand a new device. And you might take something like Dynamite, or Mighty, aka Mighty, where you don't know what the box does. It wasn't a compressor that I'd ever used, and then you start going on that journey and understanding more about it and what instruments people put it on, and gets you into trying to work out how you're going to model it. The really exciting bit has to be once you got something that's similar, and then it becomes like a hunt to try and get it perfect. And I'm known as a little bit of a perfectionist on that, and that's from fear of getting it wrong. Really, that you end up wanting to get it as good as possible, and really hunting down every single nuance on different types of instruments and try and work out how it should respond. So that end game becomes like a hunt, really, on trying to find anything where it isn't perfect on. And then when it's complete, you release it and you pray that everyone likes it. So that's kind of my emotional roller coaster as I'm doing one.
Yeah, nice. So you're saying Mighty, you hadn't used one before. So who suggested Mighty? Where did that?
Mighty was Oscar Sutherland in Sweden. He came over and dumped it on my desk and said, "That's a great compressor on drums, on bass, anything you need a smash and a rock kind of sound. Check this out. This is violent. This is a big compressor." So that immediately gave me some excitement. I hooked it up, started measuring it, and wow. And some people say it's a one-trick pony, but by God, it does a good job on creating powerful compression on drums, percussion, bass. I think for rock music would be the first stance.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a quite straightforward one. The DBX 160, that was by far the most heavily requested compressor at the start. That was an interesting journey. We started working on that probably late 90s.
Yeah.
Allen Heath was part of Harman, so I was very lucky to get to meet some of the DBX engineers, R&D engineers, and really learn how DBX compressors worked. I was really fortunate to meet Bob Orban and spend a couple of days with him and really learning on what a compressor does from his viewpoint. And he's obviously a god in creating broadcast compression, which can be completely transparent in, delivering quite a lot of gain reduction, fairly fast gain reduction, but really, really, really well optimized on not producing very small amounts of artifacts, but really producing a lot of gain reduction. I'm listening to Bob for a few days and trying some compressors with him. I think the DBX 160 was one of those, which he worked on when he worked at DBX before Orban. Was an absolute joy and really accelerated me into understanding the journey of playing around with compressors and modeling them.
Awesome. Now, I was going to ask within that, and you touched on it. So, how long have you been with Allen Heath? And
okay, yeah, I've been with Allen Heath since the early 90s. Sorry, I've been with Allen Heath since the early 90s. I worked there for about a year as a student. Then I came back after I graduated, and I've been working in acoustics at the BBC. I came back 93, 94. I've been there ever since, really.
Yep.
And yeah, what a great company to work for.
Now, you hold a doctorate, okay?
That's kind of why I went back to Allen Heath. I wanted to do a PhD in DSP, particularly studying equalizers and filters. And how various artifacts and distortion and mechanisms within those. And I did that part-time and ended up getting a PhD in around the millennium, about 2000, 2001. So some time ago. I think I've forgotten most of that now.
But without being too humble, you are very qualified at doing what you're doing.
I certainly wasted a lot of my life doing what I'm doing.
You've got a lot of runs on the board here. So
yeah, but it's great to work with younger guys too. I mean, the DSP team now, Allen Heath, is awesome. I mean, it was just one guy, me, sat in a room with a load of other software engineers. But now there's 4 or 5 DSP engineers, really young, bright, fresh ideas, and it's a privilege to work with them and see how they take that on. I'm still doing some modeling, be it valves, be it modeling compressors or EQ, but some of the new really exciting stuff's coming out from them. So, I'm the old guard, mate. I'm getting old.
That's what I say when I mix shows. I'm the old guy. So obviously there's an immense amount of hours that have gone into modeling compressors in our flagship product, D-Live. Okay. Yeah. So what I'd love to do is literally just unpack each of those, get a bit of the history, and we've touched on a few little things, but let's go a little bit deeper into them and talk about each one, and some of your tips that you've got from when you were modeling them, and even some of the experience you've seen now over the years.
Okay, that'd be fun. I mean, it'd be also good for you to chip in with some of your viewpoint on using them practically. You've got to remember, I spent most of my time in a laboratory with them, measuring them and putting various test stimuli and instruments through them, but you should chip in on real world comment.
Definitely. So starting with, now, was the 160T, was that the first one that was modelled?
Yes. So that's got the 16T is obviously inspired by the 160. Yep. And basically, I think a 160XT was. I had a few units in to see how their circuits varied.
XT was the transformer variant.
That's right, and people preferred the sound of that. And then they took the transformer off. They also played around with component variances. And there's a time constant that controls the RMS attack and release ballistic in the 160 design, and that had subtle variances across the life of the 160. And that basically slows attack and release down for small gain change. So if you smack a snare into it and the compressor decides there's instantly 8 dB of gain reduction needed, all the attack and release ballistics will speed up and deliver efficient compression and attack quickly and release quickly. For slow gain reduction, the whole thing slows down, and that circuit's changed over the years. It's been fun to watch the different nuances there. I think we modelled the best of with the 160 XT, but I checked it against others and made sure we were where we wanted to be. So all that does is it takes distortion out of LF programs. So if you put a bass guitar in or a kick, it just takes a little bit of distortion out for small gain reduction changes, and allows the compressor to operate in an efficient way, so it doesn't suck holes out. It releases reasonably quickly when it needs to. So if there's a big gain reduction release, it would release efficiently. It is an RMS device, and I think we're going to talk about RMS peak in a minute, so maybe shall I save that for now, or do you want to dive into that?
I was going to say, so the first time, and
Yeah.
bear in mind, I'd had these analog units. I had some 160 XTs I used many years in the studio, and the first time I got on D Live, and it's a bit that trick where you drive a snare in really hard, and it's got this way that it bites. And literally, I remember the first time doing it on the D Live, and I went, "Oh, that's the real deal. That's the sound."
Yeah, sure. So
100%. That's what my ears knew was at 160 biting down on a drum. So
yeah, I mean, so we're going to dive into RMS peak, I sense here.
Oh no, I was just saying, but you got it right. You know.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's kind of. I think that's part of the RMS peak debate we're going to get into earlier. Also, the 160 XT had the over easy, or the 160 we modelled had the progressive knee. A lot of digital compressors at the time were just smoothing out where the threshold was, doing it mathematically, and that really, on paper, that's great. That's a soft knee, but if you measure the over easy knee that DBX pioneered, it's a progressive knee. It's a much different curve than the soft knee kind of smoothing out of the threshold that a lot of digital compressors do. And we modelled that really accurately, and that's down to some diodes placed around an op amp. We had to, at a component level, model how that worked. And yeah, that knee sounds great, and we've done a faithful model of that. That's part of the sound of the DBX. But I think what you're describing is definitely part of an RMS compressor kicking in with fast attack and release.
Yeah,
a great sound to hear.
Normally for that sound, the knee is off. So
yeah, sure. I think it's down to the RMS nature, which I know we're going to talk about in a minute. The other cool thing about 160 is just simple to use, right? I mean, auto attack release. The attack and release ballistics behave themselves because of this moving time constant I was talking about earlier. And you got threshold, you got makeup, and off you go. It's a simple box to use.
And really good metering.
Good metering. For live environment, excellent metering.
Okay, so this is the first one I'm going to jump out, and let's have a look at some practical examples. So the 160T, we're going to look at a snare drum, and we're going to look at this time constants where the attack and release settings change the more we adjust the threshold. So the more compression, the more it bites down on the sound, less compression, it's nice and gentle. So let's look at how that works. So I've got my snare. Okay, and with gentle compression, just tickling away. But if we go excessive, you can hear the attack has changed, and it's a very slow release now. If I back that through, you'll hear it keep changing. So now it's a bit more faster on the release, slower on the attack. So hopefully you heard that as I changed the threshold. It goes from really, the attack and release times change in this compressor. So that's an important fact of the 160T, okay? That a lot of engineers like. You can really drive something hard and get it to really bite down on a sound, or you can just have it gentle. Normally, most of the time you find that sweet spot where that attack and release works and it just holds that sound together. So that's the 160T.
suppose we ought to mention the other 160, the VU version, the
Yeah.
predecessor to the 160, as we know, is the 160 with the VU in it. Quite a rare compressor. In fact, we found one in a private studio in the UK called Airfield Studios. And that guy was a very successful musician, had his own private studio, and he lent us his 160 VU, and we had to mend it, of course, to get it working correctly, and source the correct components to make sure when we mended it, it would sound how it should.
Yes,
so we had to do that, and we were able to do that because I think one channel was working, one wasn't. So we had a comparison, so we could make sure we mended it correctly. And then we modelled it. And the cool thing about the VU is it doesn't have this moving attack release ballistic. It's fixed.
Yep.
So it creates a bit of distortion on lower mids. And I think that's why people like the 160 VU. It creates a bit of distortion. The attack and release on the RMS filter's fixed. And it just creates a bit of a growl on guitars and low mid material. So yeah, it's a good beast.
Yeah, and it is.
We modelled that too after I'd done the more modern 160. So I kind of ended up turning stuff off and playing around with time constants. So that was fun to do. Awesome. And then it was really fun to return the unit to the owner, and he'd got his compressor mended. He was very happy.
Yeah. Okay, so thanks for watching. I'm going to stop the episode here, and it's going to be more to be continued. So come and watch the next episode where we're back with Rob, and we're going to talk more about compressors.